In the city, at the office, on the road, wherever he may be needed. Armed with a mower and a partially charged cell phone, one man aims to take on the world.
Welcome to episode 4 of WGDP, the world's greatest dad podcast. My name is Robert Chapman, and I'm excited that you're listening, watching, however you're taking this in. Thank you. If someone shared this with you, I'm thankful for them as well. And if this is the first episode you've turned on, then I encourage you to go listen to the previous 3. We've had some pretty amazing dads, and we've got plenty more kind of planned down the road. The whole point of this podcast is to let dads, as well as parents, really get to see that their dadhood, their parenthood experience is just as unique as they thought it was, while at the exact same time, it's a shared struggle. There's plenty to learn from each other, and this is just one of the places to do so. I put out what feels like 1 million podcast episodes over the last decade or more, but one name that always shows up is Mississippi Brilla FC's executive director and founder, Rusty Bryant. He was quite literally the first person I interviewed for this podcast back in 2017. You know, come to think of it, I think he was the very first person I ever interviewed for any podcast. He's the dad of 2 boys, he's the dad of 2 young men, the executive director of a USL League Two team, and half of the Redeemed Marriage podcast, a podcast that he hosts with his wife, Heather. Since many of the parents out there have recently experienced their first kid or even their second kid or possibly their last kid moving off to start their college career, I wanted to take this episode more in that direction, kind of to talk about the empty nests, parenting stages, with new adults, and then continuing to be an influence in your kids' lives in a healthy way. It seems like no matter whatever podcast I do, I've done 400 of them, but I always have Rusty Bryant on a podcast because Rusty Bryant understands the joys of podcasting. He has one himself, him and his wife. We'll talk about that kind of down the road and all. But again, kind of going towards what my wife said about the quality control check that she did, that I need to make sure that we introduce everybody correctly. Rusty Bryant, tell me a little bit about who you are, about your family, and how old your kids are.
I thought you were actually fixing to say how old you are. I mean, I can tell that too if I need to. So Heather and I actually just celebrated 30 years, just a couple of weeks ago. So that was incredible. So Heather and I were high school sweethearts, and we have a pretty cool story that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. But Luke is my oldest. He is 24.
Golly.
And then Logan is my youngest, who just turned 20 this summer. So I have no teenagers left.
Yeah.
But I serve as the executive director of Brilla Soccer Ministries, and been doing that. I founded and started the ministry in 1996, so 30 years ago as well. And here we are, still going strong, and just loving every bit of it. Loving the new stage of life. I'm kind of in this, it's the empty nest thing, and it's just fun, and starting to be friends with my kids. That's kind of a neat stage.
Yeah, we had the conversation just last night when we were talking about doing homework. I looked at my son, John, who's 12, and I said, I'm not your friend. I said, that's coming down the road. I'm your dad. I don't care if you like me. I have enough friends. I'm whittling them out. I don't mind you being the first one whittled out. And the look on his face was, oh my gosh, you can't say that. It's like, no, I can't. We'll deal with it down the road. But right now we're taking care of business. So usually, after we talked about, I've had these 10 dad questions. And since yours are fairly out of the nest and in their own semi-adult world, if not actually, being married and living in their own house now, I kind of just wanted to touch on maybe 4 of these because, diapers and all that were so way down the road. But I do kind of want to talk about what some of these were that you can kind of remember. So touch on more in the timeline where they were in high school. Let's say, Luke was a senior maybe, and And Logan, who I laugh, often goes by Bacon. So if we ever talk about Logan or Bacon, he's the same person. What kind of was a morning routine like in your wild house with two boys?
Well, it actually I loved the mornings because I've had this habit of I get up. I say early. I mean, some people I know really get up early, but I've never been a morning person, so I don't like to get up early. But now, kind of the older I get, it's just sort of it happens.
Yeah.
But I also set my alarm to get up with Heather, and like, or not with her. She wakes up a little bit before me because she does her Bible study and stuff, and she likes to do that on her own. And then I get up about 30 minutes before she leaves the house. And but I do that so I can help her get ready. So my job, besides the summer months, is very flexible. And so it doesn't really matter what time I get into the office, and then our evenings are full. So I kind of just am able to take my time. But anyway, I get up with her and I help her get out the door, usually fix her lunch, fix her breakfast, all that. But then when she would leave, that was about the time that my boys would start waking up. And I was the one responsible for getting them ready for school and getting them well, first of all, waking them up,
Yeah.
which was always a challenge. And then getting them, fixing their breakfast and getting them ready for school. And then, before they could drive, like, if somebody was not didn't have a car and couldn't drive yet, so their younger years, I took them to school. And I just loved those moments. And I think for me, the thing that I think about the most is fixing breakfast and having the breakfast sitting there waiting for them. They would get out of the shower, they would come in, sit at the bar there in the kitchen, and then I just got to talk to them. And now none of us are real talkative in the mornings, but but it was just a great, I don't know, I just love that, and I'm so thankful that I had those experiences and I've had those memories with them. So I wouldn't trade that for anything.
So, kind of talking about memories, my little question I always hear is, what is one of your fondest memories about being a father, about fatherhood? I want to kind of direct this answer because, again, the very first episode we did of this back in 2017, which is crazy to think of, I asked you a question about owning a soccer team, about being the executive director of a soccer team, having two kids that were very good at it, that played at a very high level, and then you kind of interacting with them in a soccer ownership manner and a dad manner. So one of the things that you said when I asked, how do you handle that? And you said, I always answer them honestly. I enjoyed watching you play. If they want to know anything about how they played, they will ask me, but most of the time I'll just be a dad. And that stuck with me very much. I didn't do that perfectly very well. I didn't do that very well at all, honestly. But I tried to do that, to implement that into my world when John played. But what are some of your fondest memories as a dad when it comes to watching your sons play the sport that really kind of allowed for the foundation of all the things inside your family?
Mm. Well, I knew that you might ask about the fondest memory because I've been on this podcast before, and now that they're 24 and 20, and both of their soccer careers are technically over,
Mm-hmm.
it makes those fondest memories even more special. And I mean, honestly, the fondest memories I have of being their dad is chasing them all over the country, watching them play soccer. And you mentioned that whole that what was my response to them after a game, and it genuinely was that I would just try to tell them, I I just love watching you play. Okay, that didn't tell them you were good today or you really stunk it up today.
Mm-hmm.
It was just I love watching you play. And and I think that as they got older, they kind of dismissed that a little bit more. You know, it was kind of like, I'm tired of hearing that. Just tell me the truth. And especially Luke. Luke is my oldest, and he was, you know, ended up playing Division I soccer and had an incredible career. But he wanted to know the truth. Like, just tell me. Just shoot me straight. Tell me how I stunk it up. You know, tell me if I did something good. Logan wasn't quite like that. Logan needed me to massage his ego a little bit from time to time, but that's okay. But I think that where I look back on that and I say those things, when I would say those things, it was really just this foundation of, I just love being with you.
Yeah.
Like, whatever you're doing, I'm going to be there. And I think that's the message that they took away from that particular comment that I would make, was wherever I am, my dad's going to be there. Whatever I'm doing, my dad's going to be there. And I was just telling some people we had rehearsal last night for the worship team at church, and they were talking about road trips, and they actually asked the question, who's taken the longest road trip? What's the furthest you've ever driven? You know, all this. And everybody kind of looked at me and laughed, because a lot of people know my road trip stories. But I actually mentioned to them, when Luke was at Davidson playing college soccer, he was 10 hours away, and we figured up that I drove either to Davidson or to away trips, 40 trips. So I made during a 4-year time span, I made over 40 trips to watch him play soccer at least 10 hours away from me. And, you know, and I just think, and Logan is not playing college soccer, but anything he has, even at school now, we're there. I mean, we're going to drive 3.5 hours to Sanford, and we're going to watch it, no matter how silly it might sound. But that's the foundation. I think that's the question that you kind of asked. How did that build? The foundation was just, our family is just here for each other. It's funny, when Luke moved back, so Luke got married in May. He took a position that's sort of a hybrid position, where he's working with me, with Brilla, but he's also doing a lot of coaching in the youth club. And he even said that, he was like, I'm sure you're going to be there watching me coach too. And it was just an assumption, you know, for him. And Heather and I, actually, believe it or not, we're busier now than we were when we had kids.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is because we've added another ministry layer onto what we're doing. And so we're going a lot on the weekend. So I actually haven't been able to go out and watch him coach yet. But I mean, that's part of the plan. I mean, I've got his calendar, his coaching calendar, his tournaments and stuff. They're in my calendar. So just like when he was a player, I had all of his games in there. Well, now I've got all of his games that he's coaching, because I'm just there. I want to support him. And, you know, he never stops being my kid. So hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, no, it does. And then kind of swirl into the next one. You know, the next one is, what is one of the toughest memories of being of fatherhood. You know, you can take this anywhere you want, but one thing that I would, you know, want to ask you to answer on is that empty nester part, when you've all been together and you've been so strong together. You know, my brother and I, we still are really close, but then it's that, okay, I'm going to start my own life. How did you manage that? So what is your toughest memory? And then in the world of everybody growing up and moving on, how did you kind of handle those? So I guess 2 questions in one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember the tough memories. We're just kind of walking through disappointments with my kids. You know, I mean, Logan had a different journey, even like a different athletic journey than Luke did. He really had to work his tail off for everything. And so there were years that, you know, he sat on the bench, and, you know, he had to watch his brother like start as an 8th grader in high school. And then here he was as a 10th grader, not even getting in the games. And so he had to wait his time, and, you know, finally as a junior, but having those conversations were really hard. And then for Luke, I mean, really it was more of when he started getting injuries and stuff. I mean, towards ACL in high school, he almost had compartment syndrome, where we thought they were going to have to go in and cut his leg to where he wasn't ever going to play soccer again. That was during high school. But like going through those scary moments of what are these injuries doing to my life and my career? And, you know, then getting into college and tearing his hamstring, and like those were just disappointments that we had to deal with. Both of our kids were really, really good kids. So we didn't have a lot that we had to deal with. Luke kind of went through a little stage, towards the end of high school and that first year of college where we had to have some hard conversations with him, and that's just part of being a dad. So I remember those things as just being really difficult, but our family was so incredibly close. We would travel together for all these tournaments. We would travel together for, it was just always together. And so when Luke left, it's funny, Heather and I just talked about this yesterday. But when Luke left, it felt like, even though he was going 10 hours away, we still had Logan at home. And we knew that Luke's reason for going 10 hours away was to play soccer. And we were going to be as much as we could. So it didn't really feel like we were losing him. It was like, oh, well, we'll see you next weekend because it's the first game. Or, oh, we'll see you again in 2 weeks when we're able to come back up here. So it was like that really through the whole 4 years of college. So it didn't really feel like we were even halfway empty nesters at that point. But when Logan left, man, like he left and Luke stopped playing soccer at the same time. And so all of a sudden we didn't really have a connection to, see them on a regular basis. And I remember I tried to hype myself up a lot. And like people would say, hey, Logan's leaving in a few weeks. Are you ready for empty nest? And I'd be like, oh, I'm so excited. Heather and I are going to have so much fun. And I realized that what I was doing was overcompensating for my fear of what life was going to be like. Not that I wasn't, I was super excited. Heather and I have so much fun together, but I was really overcompensating because these two boys were such a huge part of my life. And when Logan finally left, I remember about 2 weeks into it, Heather came to me and she was like, you got to get out of this funk. And I said, I didn't realize I was in a funk. And she goes, oh no, you're in a funk and you miss your boys and you got to get out of it. And I remember just thinking, it's a new season of life and it's going to be great. And it really was after about 2 weeks, then it just became, this is fun.
Yeah.
And so, now just the relationship that I have with the boys, Logan still calls me from college almost every day. If he does call me every day and we talk once or twice a day sometimes. And then Luke, now that he's moved back here, he drove over here to my house this morning so we could run together. So we already did our 3-mile run together. And so you never stop being a dad. And tomorrow I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm actually going to go over to Luke's house and help him do yard work. And, it's just kind of full circle and it's great. It is a great season of life.
So you get to deal with a lot of dads, a lot of young men in different phases of their life, whether they be the 24-year-old young coach that gets to coach alongside your own son, other coaches from, USL 2 all the way to the rec leagues. You get to see people at your church. And so you're getting to see because you're just in your 50s now, isn't that correct? Just in your 50s. Okay. So with your 50 decades worth of wisdom, you get to see some challenges that dads face today that either look very similar to what you faced 20 years ago or that are brand new. What are some of those challenges that you notice that dads are facing today that they either need to kind of call it out or be encouraged in?
Well, obviously the whole technology age and, Mike, I saw some stat the other day that was talking about the certain years and, certain age brackets that have never didn't grow up where they didn't have a phone in their hand the whole time. My kids do fall into that, but not to the degree of what we're seeing now. And so, when they were younger, we didn't have we still weren't, it was kind of that, at what age do you get a cell phone? Those kind of things. Whereas now it's just like, they all have them. It's like, when'd you get that? Why? Yeah. And so The thing that I think is the scariest part of that is it is what they can actually get from their phone and the content that they can get, and that's readily at their fingertips all the time. But the thing that's more scary than that is the lost connection that kids have with their families, and particularly their dads. And I think that dads, a lot of times, especially with younger kids, they can use that as sort of their babysitter.
Mhm.
And it's like, here, watch this, and sometimes it's easier, so it makes them not be as connected with their and not intentional. They're not being intentional connecting with the kids. And I just think that that's, road trips and things like that. People don't talk on road trips anymore. You just get your headphones and you sit in the, kids sit in the back and they start watching YouTube or movies or whatever. And, and it's good to pass the time sometimes, but we've just lost being able to really communicate with our kids. And so I think that's one of the things that I would stress to dads is, there's got to be limitations on screen time. There's got to be, but not just that. We've got to make intentional time to really lock in and be focused on our kids. And it goes for dads too, because I mean, how many times are kids trying to tell us something and
Mhm.
we're just doing this, and you're not locked in. When your kids are talking, look, especially a boy talking to his dad, it doesn't happen all that often. And so, like, if my kids start talking to me, my phone I just put it to the side because I want them to know I am completely locked in. And I've even gotten this way, especially with Logan. Logan's really bad about be talking and he'll be texting. Look, I'm a dude, so I know we cannot multitask. It's impossible for men to do. And so if he does that, I literally will stop mid conversation, mid sentence, and I'll just look at him until he's finished. And then he'll go, I can hear you. And I'm like, no, you can't. I mean, you literally cannot hear me. So I'll wait until you're done or put your phone down and we'll finish the conversation. But I just think dads need to be aware of that as well. It's not just the kids that's their problem. It's our problem too.
So you've got one child in college, one that's graduated. So you've gone through the empty nesting and getting kids to a school, significant amount of time away from you. We've got here in Clinton, Mississippi, we've got Mississippi Christian University down the road, and we've got a good portion of our local kids that go there. So sometimes you've got your kids down the road, but a lot of times our parents will have, their college kids so far off. This is kind of a timely question because the colleges and universities just started. You had move-in day and bid day and all these things. I've got a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, so I kind of can only imagine what that exit will be like. One of our episodes previously, we had Webb Lewis where he talked about, parents, get your kids up to Ole Miss. We're going to take care of them, blah, 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 blah. But being that parent in that situation where you drive off and, you're handing over their future to them and putting it in their hands. What advice would you have for people? One of the things I always heard with people say, the very first thing you need to do is turn off Life 360. They say that's just the hardest thing to do in the world. But how do you do that? How do you turn off that Life 360 in your heart and in your mind when it's time for them to kind of spread their wings and grow up kind of without you?
Well, first of all, I have mixed feelings about turning off Life 360 because all of our family is still on Life 360, and neither one of my boys ever asked to come off. And so I do think there's a little bit of a safety, thing there, and that we can always just, if we need to know where we do not check it very often. I say that, but I mean, I actually ran down to the trails this morning, was waiting on Luke to join me. And I didn't know where he was, so I pulled it up, and I was like, "Oh, he's in my neighborhood. Okay, good." But he's 24 years old, and I can still. I don't. It's not like I'm checking up on him, and I don't do that with Logan either. But sometimes, if I know that Logan's going out, he's got something big planned with his fraternity or something, and we're about to go to bed. And we'll just check and see, is he back at the pie cap house or is he still out? And it just helps us because then we know we can sleep better. We don't check up and see what he's doing. So So I don't know. I kind of have mixed feelings. I understand people go to college, and that's some of the things that the college people tell you. They're like, turn off Life 360 and let your kids. I don't know. I just feel like there's a conversation to be had there. And if your kids are like mine, they're like, oh, we don't care. But so for the advice, my advice is this. You do want to give them their space. And the hard thing to balance is giving them space while still letting them know that you care in incredible amounts what's going on in their life, not because you want to keep up with them or keep your fingers, keep your thumb on them or anything, but it's I want to know what's happening in your life. And I also want you to know that I'm always here for you. You can always come to me. So there's the balance of, do we just let them go, or do we continue reaching out to them? And my advice, especially with boys, is kind of let them lead the way on that. But one of the biggest things would be, don't ever make them feel guilty. Like the whole, oh, I hadn't talked to you in a week, or they're having a great time. They're living their life. They're enjoying life. And we talk about this a lot because I still have parents. Heather still has parents that live here. And sometimes they'll say to us, I hadn't heard from you in 3 or 4 days. And my response to them wants to be, well, you hadn't reached out to me.
It works both ways.
Right. And so I think that it goes that way with our kids too. It's just, look, I got a nephew that literally just started school. He's a freshman at Dallas Baptist. He's playing golf over there. And we're really, really close to the family. And he just moved in his freshman year. And so this morning, I just picked up my phone. I texted him and I was like, hey, man, how's moving been? How's the first part? How's it going over there at Dallas Baptist? And I mean, he texted me immediately, and it literally said, I was just about to text you and Heather and ask how I could pray for you. This is a freshman in college, but they still desire a connection to their home. And it may be few and far between, but they want to know that you're still there. And so keeping those lines of communication open, but not with expectations and not guilt. I also, having 2 boys, I don't think it's a bad thing if I hear Heather chirping to me and saying, I hadn't heard from Luke and Logan in a while. Yeah. Well, I can, as a dad, go to them and say, hey, look, your mom misses you. She loves you guys so much. Just reach out and say, hey. But neither one of us are ever going to go to them and say, you never call. Right. I mean, that's like the worst thing you can do to a kid that's going off to college or that's starting their own life. And I promise you, if you have a good relationship and you've built that foundation when they were young, they will actually communicate with you to a point where sometimes you're like, you don't have to talk to me this much. I mean, you don't ever say that, but it feels that way sometimes. And that's a great place to be as a parent.
We've gotten, so my Charlotte, my daughter, she likes to stay in her room and draw. Like, it's literally, she's listening to music, staying in her room and drawing. And so all the time I'll kind of go and knock on her door and be like, hey, I bet you can cash in some favors down the road if you just come and do this on the couch. She's like, yeah, all right. Like, she gets it. So she'll come in. Well, lo and behold, she's taken my spot on the couch. So, which I told Megan, I was like, I'm fine with that. She can have my spot. She's in here. She's hanging out with us. Well, then now John's starting to realize I'm just going to come in and watch my football videos and just sit on the couch, which he's trying to steal Charlotte's spot on the couch now. So there's that whole dynamic and all, but it's those little things of building that foundation of, hey, heads up, if you do this, it's going to appear this way. Okay, great. It's that kind of looking out for you. So kind of in that same vein, I'm in the world now where I'm trying to really get my kids to understand that their academics are going to help get, X, Y, and Z towards college, or if you're wanting to go into the military or whatever it's going to be, we're building that foundation to then build the early stages of life. Your kids, you've got one again who's married and has a house and has a wife and has a life. One who's, getting towards the end of that college career, figuring out what he wants to do in life. How does your role as a dad play into this section of their life where they are building their own brand of who they are and then eventually going to build their own family to where now yes, you're family, but you're the extended family. They leave a mother and wife, a mother and father, cleave to your wife, the flesh, the two become one. How do you do that to where you encourage them to establish themselves? What does that look like in your 50 years worth of wisdom?
Well, it might feel like I'm putting on my marriage coaching hat here for just a second, because I really do think that so much of that they are watching you to see how you model it before they get to that stage. So much of what Heather and I did as a married couple, and how we interacted, how we communicated, and just how we ran the family. Basically, they watched that, and so that's how they learn how to treat their wives. That's how they're going to learn how to run their household, how to run their finances. What's important to save and spend, and all that kind of stuff. Doing chores around the house. I mean, even things like that. Like, my boys, they know how to fold clothes, and they know how to do the dishes, and they know how to cook, because those are things that they saw modeled here in the home. So it's kind of one of those things where once they get to be, and I hate to say it this way, but once they get to 20 and 24, if you didn't build that foundation, it's almost like, well, it's too late now. They got to figure it out on their own. But they also know we're very, very open. Our family is very, very open as far as just talking about literally anything. And so even at this age, they just know that they can call and ask questions and talk to us. And so, I love that. I mean, I've got Luke, where the other day I took him and Cameron, his wife, I took them to our insurance agent. And I helped them and showed them, this is, get your car insurance, and it's on your car now. And, we went down to the courthouse to get their tags and stuff. And so, because like, if somebody doesn't tell you, well, how are you going to figure that out? You're going to go to Chat GPT.
Right.
Don't go to Chat GPT. Your dad's right here, So let's walk through this together. Literally, Luke walked out the door this morning after we went running, and he said, "Hey, tomorrow when you come over and help me with the yard," he doesn't have a weed eater, so I'll take my weed eater over there. We'll do yard work together. But he said, "I also need you to help me change the air filters." Well, he didn't change the air filters when he was at home. I changed the air filters. So he doesn't even understand, like, which way do you, which direction do you put it? All that stuff. How many air vents do I actually have in my house? Those type things. And so it's just, I'm here if you need me, and that you can call on me, and I'm not going to make fun of you or say, I can't believe you don't know how to do that. So just call on me. And Logan, he is really, really into like finances. And so he's always wanting to talk about budget and, how we handled investments and retirement and savings and things like that. And he keeps talking, hey, we need to go see your financial advisor together. And he's been in there with me. And so it's really just bringing them along. And like I said, so much of that has to do with bringing them along when they're young. I mean, Logan and I built, before he went to college last year, we spent a couple of weeks in the summer building him a coffee table, and we did it together. Before I was married, before COVID, I didn't have any tools. I didn't have a saw. I didn't know how to build something, but we started learning those things together. And I'm going to tell you, that's one of the most proud things when people walk into his dorm room and they're like, "Oh, that's a great table." And he's like, "Yeah, my dad and I built it." And it ain't like I'm some master craftsman, but he brought it home this summer, and it was in our den. Heather loves it, and it was in our den. And so all the Brilla players, when they would come throughout the summer, they would make a comment, and Logan would always be, "Yeah, I made that. Me and my dad did that." So it's just bringing them along. It's like they're an apprentice, and we're just teaching them. And you go through the stages of being their dad, and then being their coach, and then becoming their friend. And here I am in the friend stage. So it's a great place to be.
You know, you mentioned your Bria players. You get to be a dad to so many of these young players that are from locally right here, but also around the country and around the world. What is your life like when you get to be executive dad to all of these talented soccer players every summer?
I love it. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. These guys, and I think even the older I get, it's becoming even more because it's like I literally have kids that are their age. And so they're watching even how I interact with my kids when they're here. And so they're learning how to be a dad. And, and I treat them just like they're my kids. And I mean, we drive and pick them up to go to church. We have them over to our house. We're eating meals together. We're playing cards together. We're sitting on the back porch talking about life. They come and they watch me grill. Some of them don't know how to cook, so they're, and it's just, we don't sit down and go, hey, let me teach you how to be a husband and how to be a dad. But they are constantly watching my family to see how all of it is supposed to work. And the coolest thing is when they leave and they don't stop coming to you. So even yesterday, a lot of these players had their first official college games yesterday. I can't tell you how many texts me and Heather both were getting with links to their game and telling us that it was their first game. I mean, one of our players, they were even having rain delays and he was keeping us updated on his rain. I mean, it was literally like our own kid was about to play. But it was just as important to him that me and Heather were watching him as it was anybody else. And so just having that relationship that continues and goes on even beyond the summer is so much fun.
So you and your wife have a podcast. You are both so steeped in various aspects of ministry, which I love because I love that you get to show that the world of ministry isn't ho-hum. It isn't boring. It isn't you sit here in your little tiny quiet area. You don't talk. There is no joy. There, you don't hang out with fun stuff. Y'all go 100 miles an hour in everything you do. So I like that you get to show it, whether it's in soccer, whether it's establishing and building a church in Costa Rica, and then even in your marriage, coaching and ministries there. Y'all have a podcast to where you mentioned earlier about how open you all are in conversations about your life. Tell me a little bit about your marriage ministry, your podcast, and then how you've been blessed through that and how y'all have grown.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love that you're kind of tying in the fact that we just have lots of different ministry areas. And I think that that's a great example for our kids to be able, I mean, they grew up around Bria. So they know what Bria does. They know the impact that it has on players. I mean, this summer, the last week of the season, we even had one of our players that gave his life to Christ. And so those are the kind of things that they've been able to watch all throughout growing up. And so to understand for them that ministry is not boring. It's not, just at a church, in a church setting. Wherever you are, you're in the ministry. And if you're a believer, and so they have been able to watch just different ways of doing that. And then I think that the marriage ministry now that we have is just almost another extension of that for them to be able to go, it's really not about formal training or education. It's just using what God has done in your own life to be able to share that with other people. So Bria, that's how Bria came about. It was like, well, you know what? My gift, which wasn't much of a gift, but my gift was I just loved soccer and I loved playing. And I recognized at a really early age that soccer builds relationships, sports builds relationships. And so if I'm going to build a relationship with you and need common ground where we may not have common ground anywhere else, but if we have common ground, then I can share the gospel with you, or I can do life with you. And so it sort of bled over then into our marriage story, because 15 years ago, actually it'll be 15 years in 2 days, which is crazy, was when we journeyed through infidelity, because Heather confessed to being unfaithful on August 23rd of 2011. And it was very, very public. And so we were sort of forced to have to live with that in a little bit of the, not a little bit, a lot of the public life. And so through our healing journey, we recognized that our story could really become a source of hope for other people. And so about 4 years ago, I guess it was, I don't really know, to be honest, we just decided, well, no, I do know. It was actually a little longer than that because it was during COVID.
Yeah.
Everybody started a podcast
That's
during
right.
COVID. What else was there to do? And so we started. I actually remember calling you and being like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
What is all this stuff? But we started it on Facebook, just kind of telling our story and talking about marriage. And we would post it on Facebook, and people were watching it. And we were like, well, this is cool. We'll just share our story in a more professional manner. So we started the podcast, and it just really took off. And the more it took off, we just started realizing, man, all you got to do is just share your life with people. And when you share your life with people, people are attracted to honesty, they're attracted to transparency, and they're also attracted to mess, because everybody has mess in their story. It may not be to the degree and the extent that we went through, but everybody has mess. And so to be able to connect with somebody that's also a mess and that has journeyed through it, it's just a powerful thing. And so it has morphed into something really bigger than we ever thought. And we know that there's still way more even in the future, but we do marriage coaching 3 nights a week. We try to keep a night that we can still do worship at our church so we can practice and stuff, but nights a week. And we'll have 2 sessions on 3 nights a week. And those, like we looked last night and we're booked all the way through up until October already. And then some into October and November. Is crazy, but it just shows you how desperate people are to connect with somebody that can give them hope in the midst of their struggles. And so we started doing marriage intensives. We actually have one next weekend down in Florida. We do conferences and speaking at churches and things. We're actually meeting with a local church tonight about doing a partnership with them to be sort of their outsourced marriage ministry that they can point people to. And so it's we do retreats. We've got one next month in Montana, which is incredible. We love that. And we also have a book that we are sending to the publisher this weekend, the rough draft, so they can start editing. But there's a lot going on, and it's crazy because that all happens in the evenings and on the weekend.
Yeah.
Because we have other full-time jobs as well.
That's right.
But it's fun, and we're just grateful that God chose us to be this platform for him.
Well, Rusty, I can't thank you yet again for being on one of my mini podcasts and being an excellent guest. If anybody wants to follow along with Mississippi Brilla FC, which is the USL 2 team, you can, or the ministry aspect, you can go to, what is it, BrillaSoccerMinistries.org?
It's BrillaSoccer.org. BRILL. Yeah.
BrillaSoccer.org. You can follow his podcast. It's the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. Find it anywhere and everywhere. And then if you also want to follow another podcast in the summers, I host the Big Brilla podcast. That name came along because, we've got the Brilla Juniors and they always call them Little Brilla, and Little Brilla goes and watches in the summer. They watch Big Brilla. So I just stole the name of what we did. And so the Big Brilla podcast, where we got to kind of dissect and look at the season this past summer. It was a lot easier this past summer because we won. It was so great. So hopefully we can keep that kind of going along.
That's right. No, it was a great summer. And like the things that you do to add to the ministry, it's I don't think you even know how much you add to what we do, but just being the voice of Brilla in the live stream, and people love having somebody that actually understands soccer. And, you can go to other live streams and you're like, who is this talking? Yeah. And you spoil us big time. But even photography and the podcast. I listen to the Big Brilla podcast, like literally the second that it comes out. I'm like, I want to know what they're saying.
Yeah.
And I love it. You and Will did a great job this summer with that. And it's fun. And I love having you guys a part of what we're doing.
Yeah, well, I figure there's nobody else better qualified than somebody who watched a lot of soccer from the sideline, because I was on many a team, but I definitely wasn't a starter. I can see it from the sideline exquisitely. Anyway, Rusty, well, again, I appreciate your time and all that you do, and I look forward to what the future holds.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
You know, I love when Rusty talked about the different stages of parenting, you know, kind of where it's simplified. It's oversimplified if you want to say it, but it's very, very much there. It's when you're a brand new parent, you know, you're parenting, you're making sure that they survive. And then as they grow up, we kind of help them, we coach them through life, really. He said, right, we've got the parent, we've got the coach, and then it pays off later on to where you get to be the friend when they grow up. All the work is done on the front end, and it should pay off towards the end. It's not always accomplished, and it's not so clear cut, and everyone else's successes tend to look differently than, you know, the person next to you. But I think that it's a healthy way to look at it. It's something that we should all strive for. It requires us as grown folks to mature as we get older. We've got that expectation for our own children, right? But the expectations for ourselves, they don't stop as we journey through the decades. Easier said than done, I know that. But we'll keep aging whether we want to or not. The trick is to keep growing. Thanks again to Rusty for his time and for once again being a guest on a various random sundry podcast of mine. If you know of a dad who will be a really great interview or who has some of those amazing life lessons that the world just needs to hear, send me an email at therobertchapman@gmail.com or DM me on all of our social media outlets. You can find us on those social media outlets, Facebook and Instagram, at WGD Pod, WGD Pod.